Thank you for choosing CTN. And now, it's time with Herman and Sharron.
I love you.
Hi,
Thank
everybody.
you for joining us. This is Herman Bailey.
That's right. This is Herman Bailey.
We were married
You keep
May
saying that.
16, 1959.
Yeah.
So you figure it out.
You are just, for some reason, so proud of that.
I'm just.
What is it?
I'm just glad I'm still living. Because you should have killed me a long time
We're
ago.
still married.
Yeah,
Okay.
she should. In fact, we took a long walk this morning together, and I said to her, "Thanks for marrying me." And
I never know what to say when you say that.
And she
You're
never,
welcome.
she never says back to me, "Well, thanks for marrying me," because, and I told her, I said, the reason you don't is because after we were married,
No.
she had to say to herself, "What the heck did I do?"
No.
So let me share that. I must read this because it's like the Holy Spirit will tell you something, and I fight it. And then it comes back, and then I fight it, and then it comes back. So I go, because I don't like to do this. This is too long, especially on television. But I'm going to share it with you, okay? I would give you today's date, but I don't want to do that because we'll be showing this at other times. But it's out of Jeremiah 31, verse 3.
You love Jeremiah.
I do, my favorite book of the Bible. I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness, I have drawn you. Many people have difficulty believing God is a God of love. How could he be, they ask, when the world is filled with so much suffering and evil? It is not an easy issue, but if you really want to know the reality of God's love, look at the cross. It was love, divine love, that made Christ endure the cross, despising the shame. It was love that restrained him when he was falsely accused of blasphemy and led to Golgotha to die with common thieves. He raised not a hand against his enemies. It was love that kept him from calling legions of angels to come to his defense. It was love that made him, in a moment of agonizing pain, pause and give hope to a repentant sinner who cried, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom," Luke 23:42. It was love that caused Jesus to lift his voice and pray, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do," Luke 23:34. Does God love us? Yes. And the proof is the cross. Isn't that wonderful?
Amen.
And we need today to understand, and that's why we have programs like this, because I have a guy that I really admire. He has been a friend for a long time, and he is blessed with a mind that is is so amazing.
We're going to find out today.
But the subject that we're going to be talking about is going to be a two-parter. So you're going to see on the screen part one, that's today. Now, just so you understand, we're going to do part one and part two. And Sharon's going to have the same outfit on, and so am I, and my guest. So we're going to stay here all night in the same clothes.
Yeah, but you can see us again tomorrow.
Yeah, you can see us tomorrow.
Can we meet our guest?
Okay, let's do that, because he is a good friend, and I love this guy.
Dr. Joe Christiano is our guest today. He's a naturopathic doctor and certified nutritional counselor who has spent 40 years developing individualized diet. I can't believe 40 years.
Yeah.
And exercise programs, and from everybody from Hollywood celebrities to Miss America to you name it. We're going to meet him right now.
He was
again.
a weightlifter. When you see him,
That's
you'll
right.
understand that he has still the physique of a weightlifter.
She had all the stuff written
you be
down, but I
seated.
would take the whole
Thank you.
time.
Good to have you
Good to
once
see you,
again.
Joe.
It's good to be here.
I remember some time ago, believe it or not, we have the video, but we're not going to bring it up. They did a blood test. Remember that?
Yes, oh yeah.
In the green room?
Yeah, I remember.
And because I pass out when you get near.
Well, you were pretty powerful that day.
I mean, it was like,
you did all right.
it was like,
Yeah.
Well, he didn't know what his blood type was.
I didn't know what my blood type was.
So
It
we
turned
found
out it was B negative.
B negative.
And yet I try to be positive.
Well, I tell people, regardless of your blood type, be positive.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. But this subject, we're going to do this a little bit differently than I normally do. But the book, you need to look at the website, get a copy. We're going to go through a lot in the book, but believe me, when we do it this way, you need to get into the meat of the book. We're covering enough just to whet your appetite. So that's why we're here today on part one, because the book is so extensive and so well written and so important to us, and that's why I want to deliver it to you, that we are going to do this in two parts. I used to have an hour program, for 16 years.
Yeah.
And then they broke it up into a half-hour program, so we're going to make it an hour.
Sure.
Okay? We're going to do 2 half hours, part one, part two. But on the first part of the book, you will have, we're going to jump to chapter 10.
Okay.
We're going to do 4 and 4, because it's 8 ways of we want to project to the people. But I'm going to just give you an idea. When you get your book, in section 1, walking through the healing, and in all of the subjects, all of the chapters pertaining to that. Section 2, remedies and solutions, all of the subheadings, chapters that cover that. And in section 3, identification, map your choices, your conditions, injuries, and then 4, treatment options, adult stem cell treatments, glossary of treatments, and medications. You can cover all of that when you get your copy. We're not going to cover that today in these 2 parts. But we are going to get into, starting with chapter 10, step 1, overcoming pain. That's how we're going to begin. Now, what I would like you to do, because a lot of people, even though we've had you on a number of times, our audiences change.
Okay.
I mean, if I took a survey, it would blow your mind how many people today have tuned in.
I got
you would think,
sure.
They just found it today? Yes. So it's amazing to me, because I've done this for 35 years and know how many people stop in, leave.
Yes.
Depends on if they like what's going on.
Sure.
If they like her looks, they'll stay.
Oh, they will.
Okay. But it's amazing the dynamics of this program. So give a little of your background.
All right. Well, from a kid, I was very physically active, got involved in sports, but I fell in love with the barbell. Okay, for some reason I could relate to the barbell, and it never disappointed me. So even though I played on team sports, things like that, I really found the love in that. And so I started to train at an early age when I was 13 years old. And I started to build my body, and I could develop my body the way I wanted to.
Were you always tall like this?
Well, I guess so for my age growing up, but I wasn't any different than any other kid. But in an early age, I started developing, and I knew what I was doing. I started learning about vitamins, learning about nutrition and exercise. So as I got older, I thought, why not make your hobby something that you love, your career, and I did. And so over time, I became a competitive power lifter. That's when you lift, you squat, deep knee bend, 750 pounds.
We used to show pictures of him, but I stopped doing that. Because it just makes you very envious. Okay, but believe me, he had a Schwarzenegger type body.
Yeah. Well, I was runner-up in Mr. America and Mr. USA, and I was Mr. Florida one time. So I did all that. Yeah. But after a while, you have to wear those Speedos, and you got to get in front of 5,000 people. And I thought, okay, that's enough of that. You know what I mean?
That's enough of that.
And then through the years, I was living with pain, and I was able to disguise it by distracting myself from it. And through the years, it started to wear on me, but I was able to manage that until I got a little bit older. And in my career, I've kind of evolved myself from being a personal trainer, running the streets, going in homes and training people, opening up my own studios, to becoming a writer and helping people with the knowledge I have and the passion I have to help people be healthy, not only from their theory, but from experience, how they can improve their health. So when that trauma comes, and it's going to come.
Now tell me, this is a good place to do it. The trauma hit you.
Yes.
And I've done programs with him, and I was just telling him before we started on live that I could tell he was pushing himself when it used to come, and I would not ask him, but the reason I picked up on it, because I have to push myself all the time. And so I can pick it up on somebody that's pushing, because I'm an introvert by personality, and everything I do I have to push because I'm not supposed to be here. God has a sense of humor. And I could tell my buddy was pushing himself, and explain what happened.
Well, innately, you were sensing that, you know, and I tried to disguise it, and I had to because I lived with the pain. But one day I was getting out of bed. It was a Saturday morning. I was getting up out of bed. I stood up. Excruciating pain built up in my leg to the point it made me fall to the floor. You know, after being shocked, I got back up, and within seconds, that pain built up back to the floor. And I literally, after calling my chiropractor, crawled to the car, drove to see him. He looked at me and he goes, "You finally did it, didn't you, Joe?" You know, things like that. And I could not walk straight up. It was bent. I was bent over. He said, "Joe, I can't adjust you. You've blown something in your back." Long story short, that following Monday, I had an MRI. They said that I blew the disc in my lower back, and the fragments of the disc got caught up in my spinal cord, and I was losing. You know how you tap your foot? That's called dorsal flexion. You lift your toe off. Well, I was losing it. It becomes a floppy foot. People that have that problem, when they walk, one foot flops. So I saw a neurologist, and he says, "You need surgery, emergency surgery now." And I says, "Well, give me the pros and cons." And he says, "Well, you might get back to 100%, 50%, or you might be crippled the rest of your life." Wow. I thought, well, thank you for the bedside manner, but let me pray about this, think about it. He says, "But don't put it off." So that weekend, a week later, I was under the knife. He went in and did the emergency surgery. I stayed overnight in the hospital, called my wife, Lori. I said, "Come pick me up. I'm going home." She goes, "You can't go home. You got to go through weeks of therapy." The doctor walks into my room. I'm dressed with my jeans on. Everything's ready to go home. He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go home." He says, "Well, normally my patients stay for weeks to get rehabbed." And I says, "Well, what do I have to do? I'll do it at home. I know what I'm doing." He looked at me and says, "You know, you probably know more about this than I do, so go on home." I rehabbed myself, and within weeks and then a couple of months, I was back to doing everything I was doing prior to that. Because one, my body was already strengthened. And I'm talking about ligaments, cartilage, and muscle.
Because the vitamins, we've had vitamin shows, all of the stuff that you told people to do, you were doing.
Yes. Yes, and that's why I encourage people in the book to follow the steps that I have, because trauma is going to come. It's going to come in disease. It's going to come in from accidents, falls, automobile accidents.
What amazes me,
how do we recover?
He didn't tell you this part. What amazes me is he was doing well. I mean, really doing well. So what does he do? Which men do this. We're weird. He goes out and does his lawn, right? Falls down the hill on his rump. Thinks, as he's sitting there, "Oh, I'm probably okay. I'm probably okay." What happened from that fall?
Well, I was up on that bank, and I slipped and fell 5 feet on my tailbone, and I thought to myself, I've just undone my surgery. But I laid there and I go, if I can get up and walk, that's good, but in months to come, I'm going to pay the price for that accident. And sure enough, I got up and I was okay, but week after week after week, I was having the inability to walk. In fact, Lori and I, my wife and I, would go to Daytona Beach and walk every night after work. We'd shut the office down and go and just walk because we loved it. And eventually, by the end of that summer, I couldn't walk from the car to the beach. But what happened in the process, and I didn't know this, for a year and a half later, I broke my back. I shattered my my iliac crest, that's in the pelvis, and the SI joint that stabilizes, you have two of them, that stabilizes your trunk, was shattered. I didn't even know I did that, and I was living with that pain. But what was happening, because
and you were only getting a couple hours sleep, right?
Oh, I couldn't sleep.
You couldn't sleep.
I couldn't sleep. I couldn't walk. I couldn't think, and it was breaking me down. Well, as your spine is stabilized by these SI joints, when one is disrupted or broken or damaged, then everything's out of kilter. It could be out of kilter just a half or a quarter of an inch. Then what happened is my hips were out of place, not out of joint, but when I'd walk, it was bone to bone, and it became excruciating as far as pain because of the inflammation. And then the cartilage that protects the bone in the joint, so when we move, there's no pain, that was worn away, and now it's bone to bone. And I couldn't move. I couldn't spread my feet more than 6 inches.
So here's this athletic weightlifter,
very fit,
telling people how they're to walk and live.
Exactly, yes.
And you're on a walker.
Yes, well, I ended up on a walker. You know, Herman, I'm doing this now, and this may sound funny. I tie my own shoes now, but for 2.5 years, my wife had to tie them for me. because that's how debilitating the chronic pain became. And I know people watching
That had to be
this.
a shock to Lori.
You know, people that are in pain think about their world.
Yeah.
But they forget about the caretaker.
Yeah.
And believe me, you know, and I'm going to get I'll get too emotional here, but to have someone like her or someone in your life that can go through that season of pain, and my season of pain was a good 7 years of crippling pain.
Yeah.
She was there with me all the way through the whole thing, and she had to listen.
She's going to be on part 2. I just thought I'd say that, okay? She's going to be on part 2, yes.
And so, yes, she walked me through it. And without her, I don't think I would have made it. And she encouraged me and pushed me, because what was happening is I would be asked to come and speak at an event, go on TV, do radio or something, and I would turn it down. Because the first thing, when people have chronic pain, this is that pain that not bang your finger and ouch, it hurts for a day or two, but week in and week out, month in and month out, you're in constant pain and you can't get rid of it. You're walking through this painful time, and that's what we had to do. And I lost business opportunities because I couldn't go anywhere. She would go to the mall and I'd sit in the car.
You even got to the place where it was suicidal, right?
Yeah,
There was a time when you didn't want to live anymore.
Yes.
And I mean, I've been there, by the way. I've been there.
Well, if I can share that moment, that night, like you said earlier, I wasn't sleeping. And people that are in chronic pain don't sleep well. And if you don't sleep well, you can't heal and recover.
Right.
And so I was sleep deprived. I couldn't sleep. I got up out of bed, and I basically wobbled to the living room to find a place somewhere that I can lay down, prop my feet up, something to alleviate the pain, and I couldn't. Yeah. And I started weeping. I was done. Emotionally, physically, and spiritually, I was done. And I was crying out, praying, Father, heal me. Take this, please. Would you please take it away? And he wouldn't, and he didn't. Yeah. And I couldn't take anymore. And sure enough, here comes the tempter. All right, the tempter goes, see?
Absolutely.
I'm going to tell you something.
He's waiting right there on that shoulder.
He is not going to heal you.
Yeah.
You deserve this.
Yeah.
And I started going through these thoughts. But I want to tell you something. I've never experienced this before. My whole being right at that point became clammy and cold. I wasn't aware of my surroundings, almost like a trance. And he was saying, go get the gun and take your life, because that's the way you'll get rid of the pain.
This will end it.
Well, you know what our Father did for me?
Yeah.
He put me to sleep on the floor. 4 hours later, I woke up. He allowed me to sleep, didn't allow the enemy to take my life, and he gave me a word to say, Joe, this is why you're going through this, so you can help people that are just like you, in serious pain and have lost hope.
Okay, now if that doesn't make you want this book, I was telling him before we went on live, I said, Joe, I'm telling you, they got to know this story, because I go to people that have gone through this kind of thing. I want the person I'm talking to understand if I'm going through something. By the way, if I have a pastor and he says, you know, I've been Mr. Good Guy all my life. I haven't smoked, I haven't drank, I haven't cussed, I haven't lived an immoral life, I haven't done anything. And I'm in there to get some spiritual help because I'm a reprobate. That's when I'm going to say, I'm so glad for you. I think my time is out of here. But if I got some guy sitting in front of me and says, I'm a recovering alcoholic, I'm a recovering sex addict, I'm a recovering, I've been a reprobate, I've been on cocaine, and God changed me dramatically. He changed my life. Now, how can I help you?
Exactly.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So this is what is, okay, now we're going to start in chapter 10, overcoming pain. You've talked a lot about that, and then you go into the right attitude.
Yes, yes. Well, you know what, here's what happens when you're in pain. All you do is talk about pain, no matter where you are. And Lori used to remind me of that after she couldn't take it anymore. We'd go out for dinner, and we'd be talking about something, and then sure enough, we switched to pain. And the reason why I always talked about pain, other than I always felt pain, was I always thought about it. My mind was focused on pain. And I understand that. Someone listening right now, someone watching, and they're in pain, they could hardly think of anything else. That's why we lose scope of the hope that's there. And so I started to train my thinking differently, you know, and I share some of these things in the book. But you have to almost create, I call it mental imagery, where you change the image of pain.
What is the G-Man? Because that's a chapter.
The G-Man. That's more inspirational, but that was what it took for me to get that mental attitude to get through the rough times.
That's what is so important, is that mental attitude.
Yeah, and it's key. I decided I wanted to move from Buffalo, New York, come down to Florida, and become a naturopathic doctor. And I thought, how in the world am I going to do this? And I had very little income at the time, and so on. This is going way back. And so I worked for this major sanitation company, and I was a salesman for their compaction equipment. Well, they lost their dealership, brought me in the office, and I was the office manager. So I thought to myself, I'll become a G-man, something I don't want to do. I don't look forward to dumping garbage cans in a can.
A garbage man. So if you're a garbage man, that's what you are, a G-man.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the picture, after 4 years of living in Buffalo and working through the cold winters and the hot summers with maggots all in my face from the garbage, I kept my eye on these palm trees and sand that I was never here before in my life. And I said, that's where I'm going. So I use that analogy. So when people are in that painful time in their life, they have to make themselves believe that this is only a season.
So it's a goal.
Yes.
It's a goal, it's a focus, a mental focus. It's saying, I may be in trouble now. That's why when I talk about walking through my healing, we are walking through our healing regardless if we're not healed yet. If we're not healed yet, you're still walking through it.
Well, that's good.
You know what I mean?
That's good.
And our Father is walking with us. In fact, when he says cross the Red Sea, he was already on the other Red Sea and it was done.
That's right.
We have to go through it. So I encourage people, listen, you may be in the darkest moment, the most painful time of your life, but you gotta believe mentally. You gotta change your thinking, and focus on what you believe pain-free living is like, and focus on that.
This is another chapter, when all else fails. What is that about?
When all else fails, in other words, when you've tried everything.
You walk this road.
Yeah, and I've done, and you do everything you can to be healthy. You do everything you can that's preventative and proactive, not reactive. And I tell people, listen, don't wait till the storm hits. Prepare yourself for the storm because it's coming.
Because you did. Your body was prepared for this.
It was. When I had surgeries, and I had 2 major back surgeries, I had hip replacement surgeries, and the surgeons came back to me the next day, and they said, I want to tell you the truth. When we go in and we're carving, when we're scraping the bones, he says, I was almost getting blisters from your bones because the bone density was so thick for a man your age. And that came from the minerals I take through the years, the supplements, and weight training.
Wow.
So, Joe, what caused all this to happen to your back and your bones?
Well,
and all that?
I injured myself at one point in my life, and probably it never healed properly, and I just lived with the pain. People live with the pain. It's amazing what we can do mentally. It's amazing what we can't do because of being lazy mentally. But if you want something, if you really want something, people that smoke, I tell them all the time, they'll pray. They say, pray for me to help me try to quit. And they tried and they were successful, but they went back to smoking. I said, you focus on the wrong thing. Not trying, quitting. Focus on quitting. Okay. So when you're going through the pain, I was just going, I got too much to do right now. And I'll just suck it up. Take an aspirin, keep moving on. Take ibuprofen, move on. Keep going. Well, the body starts breaking down. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Unless you start.
You're putting a Band-Aid on it.
That's what you're doing. And even in the medical community, without bashing them, because there's a place for it, they're treating symptoms, and we all know that. I'm all about, and in my book, going to the root cause, eradicate the root cause, build a healthy baseline through nutrition, eating for your blood type. Why? Because it reduces inflammation. It builds your pH system and all that, so that when that tragedy comes, if you fall down the stairs, if you break your arm, your knee, they're telling you about knee surgery, and I'm saying to yourself, don't get knee surgery yet. There's alternative treatments that I list in the book that you may never heard of, and they're making people, they're helping people bypass surgery, and it's restoring the tissue in the joints.
I love people like you. I hate surgery.
I hear you.
Yes. Now you talk about life is in your cells.
Yes.
And this will be the last part of the part 1, and then we're going to come back with part 2, and we're going to have Lori sitting next to him. And
Lori is going to kill you.
You will see this beautiful lady that made him cry, okay? But life is in your cell. We'll go out with this one.
Okay, when we think about taking care of our body, going on a diet, exercise, take our vitamins and things like that, we're thinking of, most of the time, the outward appearance, okay? And that's okay, but that's a byproduct if we do the right things. But if we were to peel off the 9 pounds of skin that we all have, we have trillions and trillions of cells that signal to each other. It's called communicating to one another. And over time, through either disease or illness or lack of nutrition, these cells stop functioning, or they start shutting down. They call it the switch is off. And what happens is they can't communicate what to do, and the body starts breaking down. Our immune system becomes challenged. So any of these viruses that are in the air, airborne viruses, or just illnesses, we become prisoners of these things. And so our health is really, our baseline is in the cells. It's our genetic baseline. And if we can take care of that, which I talk about in the book, how you can take care of your cells and build healthy cells, you'll withstand the attacks of viruses and bacteria and germs in the air. 95% of our immune system takes care of everything that germs and everything under the sun that comes our way, pathogens and so forth. It's that little 5% window is what knocks us down. But if our cells are healthy, so I talk about that and how you can acquire that naturally. That's the beauty of it. It's not medication.
Wow. And you also talk about people are universally the same?
Yes, yes. In other words, when it comes to blood types, that's our genetics, okay? We have 4 different blood types, all right? But we still function the same way. We have intake, our body digests food. If it's the right food, it'll digest it properly. If it doesn't, it won't digest it properly. We have a lot of complications. We get energy from that cellular energy as well as overall energy. Okay, and so universally, it's not like you're from another planet and she's from another planet, I too. We're the same. It's just when we want to individualize ourselves.
And it's blood type that tells you that.
That's part of it, yes. But the blood type is really the key, the baseline. That's your nutritional baseline. I don't care what.
When you told me my blood type and the things you told me to eat and that little card that I carry, I'm telling you, when I go in a restaurant,
night and day difference.
I mean, I would order a baked potato with butter. I can get sweet potatoes now, and I finish my steak, and I feel like a G-man.
Yeah, exactly. Well, even better. Right? but that's the difference, because what you're doing is you're lining up your genetics. Yeah. Or you're lining up your food intake, your vitamins, and your exercise with your genetics. In other words, this is the way you've been designed. You've been created this way. Now do your best to be as accurate as possible, and that's what I do in the book. So I'm helping people build their body, not the Mr. and Mrs. America look, but I'm talking about a healthy body, a vibrant body.
That's the way you and your wife look.
We're working on it, okay? At this age, I'm keeping the seams together, by the way, you know what I mean? But internally is where we want to be stronger, so we can have a good quality of life. Enjoy the life we have, regardless of the amount of years we have left.
We're going to come back with part 2, and we're going to cover some of the area that I expected to cover in part 1, but I had to have that testimony, because to me that's the proof that you take care of the temple, and when this body has something catastrophic happen to it, we have the resource to come out of that. Okay? So you have to be with us on part 2, and you have to meet the wife that made him cry. We'll be right back. Part 2.
Thank you for watching It's Time. If you have recently made a decision for Christ, Herman and Sharron would like to hear from you.